Hi there, and welcome to Ian's Engage channel. I'm Ian. So, you wait weeks for a tricky bit progress update to arrive, and then two come along in quick succession. In the previous video, I dug out a channel in the lower level of the XPS Foam, where I could install the servo motor wiring. I also installed the updated servo enclosure boxes, so that the servo motors could be removed from underneath their point rodding. I ended the video by showing a list of things that needed to be done to complete the first section of the tricky bit. In this video, I'll show how I've tackled the items on the list, and we'll see how far I can get before I need to down tools in order to give me enough time to make this video. However, I'm going to kick the video off by doing something unexpected, and glue down the points. Okay. So why am I starting off by gluing down the points? Well, the location of the points dictates where everything else will be installed. For instance, the point rodding will run from the tie bar of each point to its servo motor, and all of the track sections on the layout will be connected to at least one point. However, before I could glue down any of the points, I needed to ensure that the point rodding was in place for one of the points, as it would run beneath one of the other points. I decided to use Copydex to stick down the track, as it adheres to the Cork roadbed and plastic sleepers very well, providing a strong but flexible bond. Of course, I'd managed to do something stupid on the second point I glued down, as I'd spread glue beneath the tie bar. Not a smart move for a moving part. So I had to clean the area and have another go. Copydex dries a lot more quickly than PVA, although I'd still recommend waiting at least 24 hours before trying to attach more track to any glued down track pieces. As well as using staples to keep the points in position while the glue dried, I also applied some weight, in this case using some engineering blocks. While the glue cured, I could now start preparing the track to add dropper wires to it. There are many ways of adding dropper wires to the track, and all are perfectly valid if they work for you. My preferred way is to solder dropper wires to the bottom of the rails. Before this could be done though, I needed to do some preparation work to make space for them between the sleeper webbing. I've shown this process before on the channel, but I'll show it again as it's a pretty neat method. I'd already marked the tracks where the dropper wires were to be placed, so I turned over the track and cut the webbing between the sleepers adjacent to the markings. The sleepers could then be moved apart, revealing the underside of the rail. This was repeated for all of the pieces of track before it was time to get the soldering iron out. The next job was to prepare some dropper wires. I cut 12-inch lengths of 22 gauge wire and used my wire strippers to remove about 10mm of sleeving. I then twisted each of the ends and folded them back on themselves. Next, I apply some DCC Concept liquid flux to the wires. I heated my soldering iron to 320 degrees C, then applied some solder to the tip. I then introduced the soldering iron to the wire, and the solder flows nicely onto it with the help of the liquid flux. I repeated this several times until I had all the dropper wires I needed. To connect the dropper wires to the underside of the rail, I decided to first add a blob of solder, so that the connection could be made more easily. To do this, I applied some liquid flux to the rail, then applied a drop of solder where the dropper wire would attach. However, this is where I ran into problems. Firstly, the liquid flux had ran down the sides of the rail. The flux then did its job superbly, and the solder followed it, running into the inside edge of the rail. This would obviously cause running issues, as the solder would foul any wheels running past it. The other issue was that with my iron set to 320 degrees C, it had to be held against the rail for too long to get the solder to melt, and the heat was melting the sleepers. So I had to come up with a different way. To cut a long story short, I did a lot of practicing using different methods and temperature settings until I came up with a way to consistently leave a blob of solder on the rail. The first thing I did was to use a file to rough up the underside of the rail. The theory here was that as well as cleaning the rail, the roughed up surface would help the solder adhere to it more effectively than a smooth rail. This was quite important, as I was no longer using the flux. The next step seems counterintuitive, and that was to set the iron to a higher temperature of over 400 degrees C. This meant that the iron needed to be in contact with the rail for a shorter period of time, which saved the plastic from melting. A quick dab with the solder was then all it took to leave a blob on the underside of the rail. I also made sure that I always brought the solder in from the outside edge of the rail, just in case it flowed downwards. It wouldn't matter getting solder on the outside edge. The final step was to attach the dropper wire. I did a quick check to ensure that I was going to attach the right coloured wire to the rail, black to the back and all that. I also positioned the wire so that it was heading between the rails, where the hole had been drilled. It was then a simple case of touching the tinned dropper wire to the blob of solder on the rail and introducing heat to make the connection. For this connection, I have the soldering iron set back to around 320 degrees C. And that's it. It was now time to check the electrical connectivity between the dropper wires and the rails. To do this, I used the continuity mode of my multimeter, which would beep if there was a continuous connection between the two fly leads. I systematically checked every single dropper wire and was over the moon to find that they all generated a reassuring beep. Was it possible that I've progressed my soldering skill rating from absolutely terrible to just plain bad? Or maybe even as high as OK? So what was next? Well, now that the glue for the points had dried, I could remove the engineering blocks and staples. I could then check if the track had been stuck down properly. More importantly, I could check if the tie bars still switched freely. Thankfully, they did, and I hadn't glued any of them in place, which was a bonus. It was now a good time to refit the remaining point rodding. I decided to run the point rodding back to the servo enclosure boxes with the servo motors installed and temporarily attach the rodding to the servo horns. This would keep everything in place while the rest of the track was being installed. I also decided to use staples to hold down the point rodding in its channel, although it was tempting to add some PVA glue to permanently fix the brass tubing in place. So, the good news was that everything was now in place to allow me to refit the track. The bad news was that would have to wait for the next update, as it's now Wednesday evening and I won't have time to make this video if I don't stop tinkering now. Okay, so that's about it for this update. Here's the list of things to do that we started with. So let's see where we are now. I kicked off by gluing down the points, although that job wasn't actually on the list. The dropper wires have been soldered to the underside of the rails, and their electrical continuity has been checked. The point rodding has also been installed. I've been very pleased with my progress this week, and it's probably been the most productive week I've had working on Shelfington since building the baseboards. Because of that, there are only 3 things left to do, although each of these things have quite a few elements to them. But we'll address these in the next Tricky Bit update. As usual, let me know what you think. Alternatively, if you've got any hints, tips, useful tools or techniques to pass on to a beginner in Engage modelling, or if you simply want to say hello, then please do so in the comment section. Anything and everything you've got to say will be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update on my progress soon. Bye.